Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. We are now 2 weeks away from what seems like almost definite massive strike of United Auto Workers at General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis. That's 150,000 workers. And United Auto Workers President Shawn Fain is not messing around, announcing yesterday that UAW has filed unfair labor practices against General Motors and Stellantis for illegal bad faith negotiating or lack of negotiating. He also had some fighting words that I think he might have got from Status Coup. Let's first hear the update on the NLRB charges.
The big three have a simple playbook when it comes to bargaining that can be summed up in 3 words: delay, delay, and delay. So a month ago, I sat across from each of the big 3 CEOs with your national negotiators beside me, and I delivered our demands. I told them that if they expected to drag everything out until the final days of bargaining and then try to settle everything all at once, they were setting themselves up for failure. I've told them repeatedly, September 14th is a deadline, not a reference point. UAW family, I'm sad to report that the big 3 are either not listening or they are not taking us seriously. We are now 14 days out from our contract expiration, and both General Motors and Stellantis have failed to give us any economic counters. You know, there's a pathetic irony to having these companies fixate so much on worker absenteeism and productivity when their top leadership have ditched bargaining and are refusing to buckle down and do the work of actually negotiating a contract. GM and Stellantis' willful refusal to bargain in good faith is not only insulting and counterproductive, it's also illegal. That's why today our union filed unfair labor practice charges, or ULPs, against both GM and Stellantis with the National Labor Relations Board. Unfortunately, many employers across the country are willing to break the law and incur the meager fines and penalties that result as just the cost of union busting. While it's important, we always defend our rights and seek assistance from the Labor Board in holding companies like GM and Stellantis accountable. At the end of the day, our strongest line of defense is each other and our ability to take collective action. That's why it's so important that locals across the country continue to organize rallies, practice pickets, and other actions. We need to speak out together with one voice against GM and Stellantis' illegal refusal to bargain in good faith, and we need to be ready to go on strike if necessary.
Fighting words. And technically, those unfair labor practice charges, although he's right, I mean, at the most, these companies would be hit by a fine. There is no criminal authority from the National Labor Relations Board, because in the United Corporations of America, it is completely legal to steal from your workers, wage theft, to exploit your workers, to kill your workers. I give you the Sackler family, if you've been paying attention to the buzz around the opioid and the OxyContin grand scheme that killed so many people. No one's going to jail from OxyContin, but they paid a hefty fine. Same thing with the auto companies, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. But important, if the NLRB found in favor of UAW, it could actually restrict the car companies in terms of replacing striking workers with scabs. So there are mechanisms that if they were found to have broken the law, General Motors and Stellantis, they would be restricted in terms of replacing the striking workers. Now, moving forward, he pointed out that Stellantis and General Motors are not offering counter proposals. He did get into Ford, who is offering, I guess you could say, a counter proposal that is a giant slap in the face. Let's take a listen to that part.
Today, we are once again living in a time of great inequality. The rich are getting richer, while the rest of us are getting left behind. It's up to us, once again, to turn the tide against corporate greed by demanding labor's share of the value that we produce. That's why we went to Ford and proposed a double-digit wage increase. just like the big three CEOs have received over the last 4 years, because we know our members are worth the same and more. We also have a lot to make up for in inflation-adjusted dollars. Our starting pay today is $10 an hour less than it was in 2007, 16 years ago. So we've demanded the reinstatement of cost of living adjustments to protect our future and our families against the relentless tide of inflation. What has Ford proposed? A 9% general wage increase over the life of the contract. Instead of cost of living, they've offered one-time lump sum bonuses. Companies love lump sum bonuses because they keep your base wages low, reducing your lifetime earnings. Ford's wage proposals not only fail to meet our needs, it insults our very worth. You know, we've talked a lot about how the big three CEOs saw their pay increase by 40% over the last 4 years, while our pay only went up by 6%. But company executives aren't the only ones making out like bandits while we fall further and further behind. At the risk of sounding like Jim Cramer on CNBC, I want to show you a chart about Ford's dividends. As you can see here, Ford has been using the profits of our labor produces to increase the dividends they pay out to shareholders. As of today, the company is on track to reward shareholders for all of our hard work by raising their dividend payout by 150% to a whopping $5 billion in 2023. If the shareholders and CEOs are lavishing themselves with the value that we create, then it's our turn for our fair share. I want to be very clear on this point. We will not accept nothing less than consistent living wages that will grow with the economy. If Ford thinks we will accept a single-digit pay increase and no cost of living allowance, then I hope these shareholders know how to work on an assembly line, because those are going to be the only people left to build cars come September 15th.
Damn. And these are new days and new times, because in the past, UAW presidents who often were corrupt and doing some shady stuff off the top financially would have tried to sell a 9% increase as, you know, the best we're going to get, and we should be grateful. Fain, rightly so, is saying this is a slap in the face. You're not even adding in cost of living. And a 9% increase, when you factor in all the money and all the wages that these workers have given back over the last decade, it's basically not even breaking even because they've given back extensively in terms of wages, health benefits, pension, and then with inflation, it's actually probably a cut if they were only to get 9% wage increases. So again, Fain is just brilliantly using numbers, charts, common sense to show the emperor has no clothes. They are robbing us blind. 150% increase in stock buybacks. But the next part is really what I believe we need to start hearing a lot more. I will say so myself. I wonder if Mr. Fain has been watching Status Coup and me, because I've been using this term that he's about to use for years. Brilliant and gets me going. Let's listen to this part about the big three and the crimes they are committing against the workers.
The big three are Fortune 500 companies that have made $250 billion in profits over the last 10 years and are constantly taking billions of dollars in taxpayer money, and that they have an obligation to their workers and our families and our communities. So if Ford wants to shut down a line or a plant and move those jobs to another country, then the company should be forced to continue to pay those workers until more products brought back to their plant. This is especially important during an economic downturn. Like Walter Reuther once said, nothing breeds unemployment like unemployment. So our Workers' Family Protection Program would disincentivize the big three from shipping our jobs away. It would keep our families together, and it would keep local economies strong during tough times. It also wouldn't cost the companies anything if they keep their word and honor their commitments to our members. What's even more shameful is that the Big Three would continue to threaten us with plant closures during the greatest economic run in their history. That's economic terrorism, plain and simple. Sadly, Ford has rejected all of our job security proposals. This is particularly unacceptable because right now the company is planning to move some of our powertrain work to dangerous, low-paying, non-union battery jobs outside of Ford. In fact, Ford's currently investing billions of dollars in companies that are not Ford and in a workforce that is not the UAW. And they are receiving billions of dollars in our taxpayer money to fund and support this race to the bottom. If Ford wants built in America to mean something, then it has to mean something. Our union isn't going to stand by while we replace oil barons with battery barons, who are more than happy to take billions in taxpayer handouts while offering workers dangerous jobs at poverty wages.
Preach! I've been saying economic terrorism for years. And also very good to put on a poster board when you're out at the picket line. So if you're watching, I hope to see economic terrorism on some signs when I am out there on the ground covering the picket lines. Hint, hint, help me get there. Sign up, statuscoup.com/join. Become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. I would like to be out there covering the strike in 2 weeks for as long as it takes, really. And I think this strike is going to go on for a considerable amount of time, but it's not cheap for myself and a cameraman. And unless you want to depend on CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, and Washington Post to accurately depict camaraderie, solidarity, and the working class fight back. I think not. But listen, got 2 weeks. From everything it looks like, there's definitely going to be a strike. At this point, it remains to be seen whether it's going to be against all three companies, meaning all 150,000 workers would be on strike, or if it will be targeted against just one of them. In the past, it has been targeted against, one of the big three, and then, other companies became targets later. This might just be all three at once, and I think the UAW has popular support, the wind behind its back, and I really think it should be against all three. And frankly, I believe, from workers I've spoken with, Fain's use of the numbers, just pointing out the sheer insane profits these CEOs are making, the stock buybacks. A lot of these workers didn't know the full extent of how much they have been exploited. They felt it, but they didn't actually know the numbers. Once you are armed and informed, you have overwhelming support to fight back. UAW has a pretty hefty strike fund. Obviously, workers on strike wouldn't get their full pay, but they would get some of the pay, some healthcare benefits. So I think it's all systems go. As I reported earlier this week, you might have Canadian workers go on strike just a few days after that. So this is a big, big deal. To me, it's one of the biggest things that be happening in worker movement, probably in the last year or two, definitely since Bernie's last run. And it's big for the progressive movement. We need a labor resurgence. We just saw UPS win a big contract. Now we need to see UAW go on strike and hopefully win huge, huge concessions. I want to play this last part because when have you really heard a head of a union in the last 20 years ever be talking about billionaires? Yeah, they don't need to exist. Let's take a listen.
I heard this saying once that every billionaire is a policy failure. Truer words have never been spoken. Billionaires, in my opinion, don't have a right to exist. The very existence of billionaires shows us that we have an economy that is working for the benefit of the few and not the many. I say the same's true for poverty wages and long hours. We need to wipe them out. The labor movement once fought for a vision of work life in which everyone had 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for recreation. Sadly, it feels like we've gone so far backwards that we have to fight just to have the 40-hour work week back. Why is that? so another asshole can make enough money to shoot himself to the moon?
Like I've said in my coverage of this for weeks now, to me, this is bigger than just the auto industry. This is about the last 40 years of neoliberalism, the United Corporations of America, a new Gilded Age, and frankly, an economic Hunger Games we are living in. These companies are, in my view, capitalistically evil. They are stealing from the workers. It's called wage theft. It is the biggest crime in America against the people. And finally, you have a union boss and workers behind them fighting back. Now, they might not get every single last thing they want, but when you demand the most, you're going to get a lot more than the crumbs we've been getting. Stay tuned. And like I said, we really want to be on the ground covering this. Help us do it. StatusCoup.com/join. Become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month.